If Joe Biden brought home classified to give to his drug addict son so he could try to impress his friends in the shady business deal that he only had because he was selling access to daddy when he was vice president, they got a big problem. That's a big problem. That is actually a red letter violation of the classification statutes. That's not, oh, I made a mistake and oopsie, I brought something home. That's I am willfully benefiting from exposing classified to exposure. I mean, to being out there in the open market.
After a special counsel was named, but before the FBI searched, President Biden went to his house in Wilmington. What was he doing in there?
I would refer you to the White House counsel office.
So it was something relating to this case?
I would refer you to the White House counsel's office.
Okay. Do you think that this story was leaked by someone trying to bruise the president politically ahead of a re-election announcement?
I would refer you to the White House counsel's office, as they've been the ones who've been closely involved.
Okay. More basically, we know the president did it. Why did he do it?
I would refer you to the White House counsel's office.
In the president's own words, he admits to having information that wasn't his. Why did he smuggle it out?
I will let the statement of the president stand for itself. I'm just not going to go into down a rabbit hole with you on this.
I mean, you got Karine Jean-Pierre there, the White House press secretary, almost like she's in a courtroom pleading the fifth. Right, that this is the way it sounds. You know, I refer to the White House counsel. I refer to the White House counsel. It's like I invoke my rights against my Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. She's repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. This is where we are now. This I do not believe was a conspiracy of any kind. I think this was the Biden White House, which is full of very arrogant but very incompetent people, none more so than Joe Biden himself. And that has been known, including by honest Democrats for 40 years. Even honest Democrats before he was president, Clay, would say, Joe Biden, kind of a dumb guy who just grins and shakes the hands and says whatever he's supposed to say. That was his story for a long time. So it's not surprising that this is where we are, but they don't have any answers that are going to make this thing go away. What I think is fascinating, two elements I want to introduce into this conversation, Clay. One, the spokesperson for Barack Obama was asked if we haven't talked about this possibility. I mean, what are the chances that Pence, Trump, I know Trump's is a different situation, but there were classified documents in a non-classified facility. Maybe they were declassified, but put that aside for a second. Pence, Trump, and Biden, Hillary's email server, let's not forget, which is the same thing, by the way, having classified emails on your home computer falls under the same Espionage Act statutes as having pieces of paper that are marked classified, right? It's just about the information and its protection. Barack Obama, that's one possibility here. His spokesperson had nothing to say about this. And the second thing is, as you and I were talking about this, the New York Times effectively mirroring the analysis of the Clay and Buck show, which is Trump's get out of jail free card has just arrived.
Front page story in today's New York Times, reading it this morning before our show, gives the exact same take that we have given to you on this show since the Joe Biden classified document scandal began, which is basically any opportunity to charge Trump has vanished. And what I would say, we talked yesterday with Andy McCarthy, and I'd encourage you guys to go download the podcast. Was it yesterday, I think? I love Andy McCarthy. Super smart. He's one of my favorite guests that we have on. But what I would even further the argument on right now, Buck, is I think the Biden scandal on classified documents is such a mess that it's going to make it really difficult, if not impossible, for Merrick Garland to bring any charges against Trump at all. And that's me changing based on the facts changing, because I really believed that, in fact, I bet you a steak dinner on it, that Merrick Garland would charge Trump as well as Hunter Biden, and that would be the cover that he would use. And I don't think that's going to happen. And let me mention this. I love that Doocy. We need to grab the Doocy asking Karine Jean-Pierre. I'll play it for you in the next segment because I know we had it a couple of days ago. What four-letter word she thought of first when she saw the story about this. But if Karine Jean-Pierre was not a lesbian, I think that we have like a budding romantic comedy here between Doocy and Karine Jean-Pierre and their interaction. I'm going to play that audio for you at the end. I also want to mention, as bad as Karine Jean-Pierre is, we had an article up about this at Outkick Buck. You know that Saturday Night Live has not lampooned her at all? Maybe one of the easiest people to make fun of. They barely done Biden, but the fact that they have not easily ridiculed Karine Jean-Pierre over what she's had to do as White House press secretary is evidence of how much they have moved from comedy to propaganda in many parts of what would otherwise be the comedic universe.
What is she going to say, though, about all of this?
She's painted into a corner, Buck. She
Right.
has no good options.
There's no good options because the context for this matters so much. It's not just that Joe Biden was just taking classified home, which he never should have done, in multiple... What this means, everybody, really, as somebody who lived under this regime of the Espionage Act and classification statutes and, need to protect sources and methods, and honestly, more than anything else in the CIA, they made you terrified of not protecting information adequately. That was drilled into your head from the very, in the same way in the military, it's, got to follow orders, right? You got to follow orders. In the CIA, it's you got to protect information. You got to protect information. I mean, it's just the center of your brain, and they go right for it all the time. So I can tell you that the fact that they found classified documents in these various places with Joe Biden means that he was habituated to doing this, which is that he would just take classified home with him, put on his slippers, and decide that it was time to kick back, relax, read some TS documents that he had. Now, I know Tucker's show last night was delving into why interest in these particular documents, which I think is really noteworthy because, Joe Biden, I don't think he's a big reader. I think that's fair. I don't think Joe Biden's going home and going deep into, a history of the Franco-Prussian War or something. I think Joe Biden is, glad-handing, playing golf, and going swimming naked in his pool. That was true, by the way, in front of the Secret Service agents, including women. Used to go diving in without any clothing on. But with all this going on, there's a visual image that everybody has now. Sorry about that. With all this happening, it's clear that he was doing this on a regular basis, which means that there was a recklessness. And by the way, there is a recklessness piece in the statute. What Donald Trump did was, as president, willfully deciding to take information that he is at least able to argue clearly he is within his rights to take. And now, by the way, if they found anything with Barack Obama, it would be really interesting. Does Barack Obama do the same thing essentially and say, oh, no, I declassified this? Does he go with the Trump argument?
Oh, that is funny, too. And look, this is a big part. I'm glad you brought that up about Biden. It's important to remember that a lot of these classified documents were from when he was in the Senate. And senators on both sides of the equation, Democrats and Republicans, have said this is almost impossible to explain because the way that they are exposed to classified documents, they can review them in a secure location, the United States Capitol, and then they immediately have to turn them back over. So how did it come to pass? And you mentioned the Miranda Devine, that he would have those documents from when he was in the Senate. You mentioned Miranda Devine. I think that's important. She was on Tucker last night. We also did a deep dive with her. You can go download the podcast. You're doing deep dives. Lots of great stuff. Just trust me on the podcast. But her point here is she specifically references one 22-part, numbered email from Hunter Biden that appears to potentially include classified information related to Ukraine, to ask whether these classified documents are connected to the Hunter Biden selling access for money scandal, and that there may well be an opportunity now, which Democrats have tried to wall off, to connect Joe Biden to the behavior and potentially illegal acts that were undertaken by his son Hunter. So the story about the classified documents for Biden is a mess. It takes Trump off the table, I think. But, Buck, the really big story here is if this special counsel recognizes where these documents are coming from and is able to connect Hunter Biden's lobbying, in quotation marks, whatever you want to call it, with some of these documents and the information that might have been shared over Ukraine, Russia, and other countries, China, that Joe Biden had access to.
So what seemed to be the argument last night that Tucker was making on his show on Fox was that if you look at one of these emails that Miranda Devine found in the laptop, it goes into this analysis that certainly reads like a State Department cable. We know that Hunter Biden's ability to assess Ukrainian energy or any politics for that matter is zero. Like, you might as well just walk around the street and be like, hey, what do you think's going to happen with this natural gas company in Ukraine? No one would have any idea. Hunter had no idea. So what seems possible here is maybe Joe gave him a State Department assessment, which those assessments, because they are derived from access to classified information, intercepts, human sources, etc. Now, they can be. They're not always, but they can be derived from those things. They can be classified, and they can even be classified at a pretty high level. If Joe Biden brought home classified to give to his drug addict son so he could try to impress his friends in the shady business deal that he only had because he was selling access to daddy when he was vice president, they got a big problem. That's a big problem. That is actually a red letter violation of the classification statutes. That's not, oh, I made a mistake and oopsie, I brought something home. That's I am willfully benefiting from exposing classified to exposure. I mean, to being out there in the open market.
And that is where it goes from, oh, Hunter lied on a gun dealership or gun ownership application, or Hunter had issues with his income tax, which both seem quite clear at this point, to Joe Biden was sharing state secrets with his son, who was being paid millions of dollars by foreign adversaries. That is, again, I already think that the uncovering of everything related to Hunter Biden and Joe Biden is infinitely bigger than Watergate, and especially the big tech collusion and everything that's gone on to protect that. But this would be something where the special counsel would be able to aggressively go after this. I was making a joke about the Peter Doocy and Karine Jean-Pierre relationship, and much like the Elon Musk AOC relationship, it kind of feels like the beginnings of a romantic comedy. Now, the challenge here is Karine Jean-Pierre is gay, so I don't think Peter Doocy is going to suddenly flip her to heterosexuality, although what a story that would be. But this was a really funny question coming off the weekend when more classified documents are found. Doocy is really good at his job, and he's got a pretty good sense of humor. If you didn't hear this question, listen.
When you found out that the FBI had located even more classified materials in Wilmington, which four-letter word did you use?
Oh my goodness, Peter.
Can't say.
I mean, that is pretty fabulous. Like, that is a scene that would be in a romantic comedy. Back in the day, remember when, and I think they're still together, right? James Carville, Mary Matlin, they were the lovable two different sides of the political consultant game.
Mary Matlin hosted at the EIB, the Golden Mike, on many an occasion back in the day.
She's great. And James Carville's really entertaining. I mean, the combo of them was sort of it's kind of a refreshing time when people, let's go back in time, when you could disagree on almost everything, but still enjoy spending time with each other. And I believe they're still together, have multiple kids, and it's really kind of fascinating the way that played out. I don't think there's any modern day version of that because Democrats have decided that Republicans are evil and Donald Trump is Hitler and all those things. But I will say, Buck, and we were talking about this off air, I don't think we said it on air, Trump has seen a pretty noticeable uptick in support as all of this classified document scandal has continued to come out.
Well, doesn't that make perfect sense? Because I think for a lot of people, just the country going through, and yes, it would have been Democrats' fault, and yes, they're crazy, but the country going through the indictment of a former president and possible future president in an election year, it just felt like that's such a mess. I mean, we can't deal with that. Now, I know a lot of people listening are saying, no, we fight through that. It doesn't matter. Okay, fine. But 5 or 10% of the electorate doesn't want to go through that, doesn't want to deal with that. And I think, once again, when the New York Times on the front page is basically saying, Clay and Buck are right, which is not how they phrased it, to be fair, but it is more or less the takeaway, Trump is no longer in legal jeopardy. I mean, and I think to your point, it's even changed the assessment of the January 6th. We talked to Andy McCarthy about this yesterday. One of the things I love about Andy, I've known Andy now for, 12 years. He tells you things that he thinks are legally true that you may not want to hear. So if he thought Trump was, in the hot seat still, he would say it. And he's also tends to be conservative in his assessments of things. With January 6th, he's basically at wave it off territory, which I think means there's no charges coming against Trump, which totally changes the Republican primary dynamic and the general election.
It was way easier, as we told you on this show, to make a case of obstruction, mishandling of classified document case against Trump because there was much less of a conflict, much less attenuated, difficult of a legal case to make. January 6th is really hard, right? You're going to hit him on a conspiracy, like it's a really aggressive legal reach, as Andy McCarthy has said. Getting legal advice, he got legal advice that what he was doing was not improper.
Right. And going after Trump for January 6th, I think even that middle 5% of the independents in the electorate or whatever would understand that's a political hit. Without the documents, you have them or you don't. Obstruction, you did it or you didn't. This whole, legal theory, prosecution, it's so clearly political that I think that might have backfired on them anyway. So now I think it clearly backfires on them, and that's a different place because this is where we are, friends.